Welcome to Photoshop WoW 6.2, part 2 of a 6-part series album design program presented by Leather Craftsmen. Last week we went into selection logic, grouping our images into spreads and developing our overall album collection so that we're prepared to dive into Photoshop, whether we're using templates or custom freehand designing. We have everything grouped into layouts so that we know how many pages we're going to design and what the overall story of the book is going to be before we start. So before I really dive into a grouping of album designs, occasionally I like to go through previous designs. I like to look at other designs that I've seen on the web that other photographers have done, just kind of getting ideas, a mental data bank of ideas that I can use for freehand design, because today we're going to talk completely about freehand design. We're not going to use any templates for the designs that we do today. And so what I want to do is I just want to kind of glance through ideas that like I said, I've either done in the past or ideas that I've found from other photographers, just to kind of put that in the back of my head, whether it's different clusters and groupings, things that are combinations of horizontals and verticals that I might not think of on my own. And so I like to find ideas, just kind of put those in my head, get different ideas so that it's there, and as I go through the design process, especially with the pre-cropping process that I'm going to show you today, I'm ready to just dive in, crop, drop the images into the layout, sort them out, and move on. And so this is something that I like to do just every once in a while, just to remind me of things I've done in the past and to find new ideas, like I said, from other photographers and things I've found on the web. Okay, so after I skip through that kind of stuff, now my brain's ready to dive into an album layout itself. So the first thing we have to do is go into Photoshop and we have to make a new spread. Well, with the new spread, I have to put in my spread size. So this first book we're going to do is going to be a 12 by 8 horizontal. So the spread size is going to be 24 by 8, 300 dpi RGB 8-bit with a white background. Now I'd like to not have to think of the math every time I do a new size. So I'm simply going to say hit the Save Preset button and title this a 12 by 8 album. And I leave everything checked and say OK. Now on the little flyout, I have 12 by 8 album here. So while I'm thinking about it, we're going to do a couple different size books today. We're going to do a 10 by 10, which would be a 20 by 10 spread. And so I'm going to save that as a 10 by 10 album. And then I'm going to do a 10 by 15, so that would be a 20 by 15 spread. Save that as a 10 by 15 album. And I always mark everything width by height, so I don't have to put horizontal or vertical, because I always know what I'm looking for, because it's width by height. So I know this is a horizontal book, square, vertical. And I do that consistently, so even if I've designed 30 or 40 different sizes, they're all sitting right there, and I can go through and just grab that layout size real fast for a 12 by 8 book and say OK, and I'm done. I never have to do that ever again. Okay, so once I've done that process, now I want to drop some guides in on my layout, but I want to do this as quick as possible. We can drag the guides from the rulers, but I don't want to do that every single time. I'd like to just speed up the process as few clicks as possible to just speed up the overall process. I'm gonna get rid of that top palette there real quick. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're just going to make a set of guide actions. And so let's close this down real quick. And so we've got our class guide set, and I want to make a set of 12 by 8 guides. So I'm going to start with a new action. The new action comes from the action palette in the lower right hand corner. Looks like a new layer icon, and it'll give you a new action. Now just to back up really quick, if you've never made a new set before, just to the left of that is your new set icon, and that's where you can make a new set of actions, and then all your actions go in underneath that in the set. So we're going to make a new action, 12 by 8 guides. The first few guides I'm going to do by percent. I'm not going to drag them out because I want exact numbers. So I go to View, New Guide. I want it perfectly in the center, so I'm going to say I want it 50%. It's going to drop that guide right in there for me. View, New Guide. I want another 50% horizontal. This gives me my bullseye. Doesn't matter what size the layout is, I know that this is going to give me a bullseye. Now of course I'm going to do some stuff that's specific to the 12 by 8, so this action will only work on the 12 by 8, but I'm starting off with general settings here. I'm going to do 25%, so I have halfway through the left page. Now if you weren't able to attend last week or look at last week's video on the website, I refer to a layout as two pages, a left page and a right page. So the 25% puts a guide right in the middle of the left page, and 75% puts a guide in the middle of the right hand page. And so now I have the center of my album, which is where the split of the album will be, and then I have the center or the bullseye of each individual page. Now I want to go in and I want to pull guides for what I call my safe zone. This is not the trim of the book, but this is where if I'm not going to do a full bleed, I want to stay within so that I have no optical challenges. And what I mean by that is I'm going to stay a ½ inch, so 0.5, a ½ inch in from the 3 non-binding sides. So basically that's my left, my right, my top and bottom. Because I don't have to worry about the center because there is no trim on the center, but there will be trim on the outer edges. And so I want to get this guide in here, 23.5. And this is the way I do it. I never have to worry about did I get the guide in the right place because I'm physically punching in the numbers. And then what I will do though is I will go ahead and put a ½ inch guide off the center so that if I do design something that I want to come in a ½ inch off this side and it might be offset a little bit, I want to know how offset I am from the center line in comparison to the outside edge. It's basically like I have a ½ inch on the top and the bottom. I want a ½ inch left and right of my individual page. So I'm going to go ahead and toss those guides in there too. So on a 12-inch wide book that would be at 11.5 vertical and then 12.5 vertical. And all this time the action's been recording all this, and so I can press stop at the end, and I like to double check my action. So I'm going to go View, Clear the Guides, and I'm just going to simply do a double check here and make sure that they all pop in there in the right place. And now I never have to do that ever again. And you can see I have my full layout, I have my center of my layout, I have my left page with a ½ inch safe zone all the way around. My right page, same thing, ½ inch safe zone with a bullseye on the left and the right page. And again, no trim in the middle, but for my optical challenges of design, which basically when they trim the top and the outer edges and the bottom, it's not necessarily they're going to lop off the exact same amount off of each side. They're going to shave the book so that it's just till it's perfectly smooth. So the top might lose a 1/16 of an inch and the bottom might only lose a 32nd of an inch. Well, if I pushed my image all the way to an 1/8 inch from the edge, the top is now halfway. We cut off half that distance. The bottom we only cut off a quarter. It will be obviously optically closer to one side than the other. I found that a ½ inch is more than enough. Same thing left and right. I want my spacing to feel fairly similar. Well, especially since I know I'm getting trim on the left here, but in the center I'm getting 0 trim. This will always be a ½ inch. This will always be a little bit less than a ½ inch. And so I want to come in enough that I don't have to worry about that optical challenge. So that's how I set up my guides. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is open up a set of images. Now this first little set here that you might have seen at the very end of last week is this set is pre-cropped. So I'm cheating a little bit here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this action called drop zone. And the way I set myself up for this drop zone action is I get one image above my layout. And so I just kind of control tab through my images until my layout comes up, and then I control tab one more time to get one image above, and then I simply hit my drop zone action. And what it's going to do is it's going to drop all those images in there, and it's set to drop up to 8 images. Well, I don't have 8 images, so this last one, it's actually trying to work on the layout, album layout itself. I don't want it to do anything, so I'm going to cancel that. I don't want to save it, and I don't want to discard that, because otherwise it'll just close it, because it's been told to copy and close every document. And I'll walk you all through that here in just a second. So at this point, I'd be able to go ahead and design this album layout really quick because all my images are already in here. And so I can just come in real quick, line everything up, and there's a quick cluster that is set to be centered, and that album layout could be done. And so how I do this, I'll pull all these images back out, and we'll walk through this and write the action itself. Now these images are pre-cropped. We're going to come back through and I'm going to show you my cropping process. So I need a set of guides, 12 by 8 guides. I'm going to press play on my guides. That brings all my guides in. I'm going to get one image above, and I'm going to go in here. We're just going to throw this old drop zone action out, and we're going to create a new action called drop zone. Okay, now it's going to record everything I do from this point on. So the first thing I do is select all. And then I copy it, and then I deselect, close my image, and paste. And then what I'm going to do, on my keyboard, I'm going to control tab to the next document. And in CS4 I found that I like to control tab 2 documents past, stop the action, and throw away the first one, because CS4 tends to be a little bit smarter than CS3, and it remembers the order that they're opened in to the next document, but it doesn't go past that. And so just for the process of recording it, I do that to clear out the memory of the next document was the third one back or the fourth one back, and it just goes select next document. Whereas CS3 does that on the first one. So I do that just to make sure that I'm not going to have any problems. And then I'm going to test my action. So I get one image above, press drop zone, and press play. And I now have the next image. I can click back and go, perfect. There is the image I just did the drop zone on, and I can press it again, and it's dropping them in there with no problem. Okay, so the drop zone action is working. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close all these one more time and reopen it, and we're going to throw that away. I'm going to rewrite it one more time so we can see. So I'm going to tab through, getting one image above my layout, create a new action, drop zone. Of course you can title it whatever you want. And here's the process of writing the action. It's recording everything I'm doing. I go to select menu and select all. I go to the edit menu and I hit copy. I go back to the select menu and I deselect. I go to the file menu and hit close. I go back to the edit menu and hit paste. And then on my keyboard, control tab to the next image. And like I said, I like to do it twice. Stop the action. I like to throw away the first one. So you can see in here it says select next image document, select next image document. We can pull these out, and I just like to get rid of that first one to make sure that it's not remembering the order of the images specifically. And then here's where I really get lazy. I don't want to press play every single time. So I'm going to grab from the very first action or the very first command it remembered down to the last command, and I'm going to copy it a second time, third, 4, Okay, I accidentally just drug that into another set of actions. That was not my intention. We're going to go put those back. Those are actually just going to go to the trash. Go back and re-grab that set. So I want to go from next document to set selection. There we go. I'm going to do this about 8 or 9 times, because I want to be able to drop as many as 8 images into my layout with one single click. So I can tab to the first image over the layout. I have to be the first one, because what it's going to do is it's going to copy and paste that image down into the previous document. And so if I have 2 images on top of it, it's going to copy this image, paste it onto this image. So I have to be one over, and then when I hit drop zone, it's just going to keep doing this over and over until it gets to either the end of the action or it runs out of images and it lands on your album layout, and it's going to ask you, do you want to save this, don't save, or cancel? You always want to just cancel this action, because otherwise what it's doing is it's trying to copy and paste it onto a document that doesn't exist. So I just hit cancel, and at that point I have all my images in an album layout, and it did it really quickly. Just going to kind of pull these aside again, just like you saw the first time. You can see how fast we can just kind of quickly grab and go. And that's how we create our drop zone action. Okay, so now that we've basically set ourselves up to drop our images into an album layout, open our album layouts quickly, drop our guides in, a couple ways or a couple things I like to do with the album. First of all, my album file format that I find just works pretty simple. I like to put all my album files or my design files in one folder, and then the PSDs, the files that we're going to design, I like to put them in a separate folder so I can always go back to the album itself without having to sort through the design files. Okay, so I'm going to open up the design files, and we're just going to pretend this is one event. It's a combination of images from different stuff, just so you can see kind of basically a hodgepodge of ideas here. And so the first thing I'll do is I'll just open my images. And so if this was the first layout of a 12 by 8 album, this is the first thing I would do, and then I'd hit my 12 by 8 guides. Press play. And there's my 12 by 8 guides. So now, instead of just quickly running drop zone, I'm going to pre-crop. And so what I'm going to do in my head, let's put a little layer up here, blank layer, I'm kind of seeing an album layout. I'm seeing this first image is going to go right here. It's going to fill up half that page. Aren't you glad we got Photoshop to keep everything straight? I'm seeing this image kind of floating right here. And so I'm going to crop these images to 12 by 8. And in this image, I don't know exact dimensions here. All I know is that this document is 8 inches tall. And so I want this to be 7 inches tall. So it's going to reach my half-inch lines. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to crop this to, so I hit C for my crop tool. I just tap the enter key and it automatically loads up my marquee up here in the width and the height, so I can just punch in 12 by 8 at 300 dpi and press enter. Drag a crop and move on. So now I'm going to move to this one. I want my width to be deleted, but my height is going to be 7 and my resolution is going to be 300. Drag that in there. And now I'm ready to do my drop zone. So I make sure I'm one above, grab my drop zone, press play. Now, since I cropped, it's going to ask me, do I want to save that cropped version of that image? No, I don't want to. Don't save. No, I don't want to save the cropped version of that one. But here's my album layout. I want to hit cancel. So now I can take this image, drag it over, fit it into that space idea, drag this image over. When I put my guides in there, everything lines up. I can throw my little bad sketch away there. That'll snap to that bullseye. It's in the center. There's an album layout. that layout would be ready to be saved. So I would do a save as. I would navigate this to my folder, which today we're in the 6.2 class album PSD, and this would be album layout 2.3. Now since we did this the other day and all the files are still in there, I'm just going to go ahead and save this as album layout 10.11. Now you might see that I'm doing all my spreads by the page, so I haven't done a page 1 yet. I haven't done that first page of the book, but here's 2 and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now we just did 10, 11. You'll see that I separate everything by an underscore. I've done dashes and dots and all the little markings you can think of on the keyboard, and I found that I never lose a file or corrupt a file with the underscore. So I recommend the underscore, and once you do it a few times, it's pretty easy. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now, instead of closing this document and starting all over, I want to write an action that will allow me to quickly clear this layout out, add the guides, and maybe reset my screen to kind of just a restart point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my guides, I'm going to turn my guides into a guides reset action. And what I mean by that is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to press record, open up my history palette, and I'm going to go take a snapshot of that original layout, the clear layout. Now I'm going to press stop real quick and I'm going to run that snapshot to the top of my guides. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly go ahead and press play and let it run everything out. So now my guides are all in there. I'm going to press record again and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to go to my history palette and I'm going to clear out the history. So it clears everything out of that history, so that layout is now like a brand new layout, and it has no history states tied to it, so we're not taking up RAM in Photoshop, so it's basically like a new document. But now I want to go one step further. I want to kind of reset my screen so all my images open the way I like them. And everybody might like them a different way, but the way I like them is I like to see them tiled, kind of the old-fashioned way that we've had in Photoshop for years. And so I'm going to go to the top of the Actions palette to the flyout, and I'm going to add an Insert Menu item. And it just pops up like this, and what you have to do is while this is sitting here, before you say OK, I'm just going to go to the View menu, Screen Mode, Standard Screen Mode, and press OK. And at this point, I'm just going to hit Stop. And so when I play this 8x12 guides reset now, when I press play, it's going to clear out the history state, put the guides in there, and it's going to reset me to the standard screen mode, so now that all my images open in the standard screen mode. I really love it, because I like to be able to see everything as it's kind of loading and know what it's doing, and I don't have it all kind of blacked out or grayed out with the background. I want to be able to just, if I want to shift the images around, I can still grab them if I need to. And so I'm going to go ahead and do a pre-crop. Now, to kind of show you what I'm thinking, let's add a layer here and a brush. I'm going to go back to my selection logic here. I've got 6 vertical images. I've got a long panoramic spread here. 6 images into a 24-inch long spread would be split up into 4s. So that would make a common width for that would be 4. So height would be a 4x6. So I'm seeing, okay, 1, 2, 3, not very good 4x6s, 4, 5, 6. So this would be 6 4x6s that I can just crop each one to 4x6 and it should drop in there. So that's what I'm kind of visually seeing. Okay, just close the layers palette. All right, there we go. I'm going to throw that away because I don't really need that. And now I'm just going to go in, tap C for my crop, tap the enter key, it automatically throws up my marquee so I can type in 4x6 at 300, and I'm ready to crop. Nice thing here is, if I want to crop in a little bit on these, maybe I want to just have this to be a nice little tight crop, I can do so. And as soon as I press enter, I go ahead and just kind of control tab to the next image and crop my way through all these. I'm going to kind of keep it tight to the bottom because there's a couple here where the dress gets really close to the bottom. And finish all this up. And they're all cropped now. Okay, so I tab 1 in front of my layout and I just hit drop zone. And I just tap the D key for don't save on all the ones I don't want to save. Now here's the problem. This gets going kind of quick and it's just dropping them in there at a good pace. You want to make sure that you don't accidentally close your album layout. You just want to cancel that last command. Okay, so I can take my first image, drag it all the way to the left, take my last image, drag it all the way to the right. In the layers palette, I can select all my images with the move tool selected. I have my alignment and distribution tools. So I can distribute evenly on horizontal centers and then align them. Now that alignment made it a little bit bottom heavy. Maybe I want them perfectly centered, so I can add in the background and say I want them all perfectly centered to the background. And so now it's perfectly centered, top to bottom, and they're all evenly distributed. Let me do that again. Okay, so let's say the images, you're looking through them and you get them a little bit scattered because you're trying to decide exactly what order. Oh, you want her looking around. All right, I just want something like this. You know what, this looks like really a first shot to me. And just kind of twirling from that point on. Okay, so I'm going to just line up the first and the last image on the left and right hand edge. I kind of have my story here. The way I'm clicking through these really quick, by the way, I'm holding down Command on the Mac, Control on the PC. And whenever I click, it automatically selects a new layer because I do not like to have the auto select checked. Because to me, once we get deeper into the album layout process, it selects a lot of stuff that I just don't want selected. So I click on the top layer here in the layers palette, hold down shift, click on the bottom layer. It's going to select all those layers. I'm going to align them to centers and distribute them to their vertical centers. So now they're evenly distributed. And then I'm going to hold down Command or Control on the PC, click on the background to add that into my selection, and then I'm going to hit on that horizontal button and say I want them all centered horizontally. And that would line up that album layout, and I'd be ready to save it. So this would be 12:13. And here's where that action guide reset really comes in handy because I just tap that and now I'm ready to start my next layout. It does it automatically. It's really quick. I go back to my selection logic. And you also notice that it's keeping the current file name. So I always have to do a save as, because if I just do a save, it's going to save back to the same document that I previously, or the same layout that I just designed. But the nice thing is, it's keeping that number, so whenever I do save as, it's right there. I can just look right here and go, okay, my next one's 1415. That seems really easy until you get about 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 sides in a book, and you don't want to have to scroll down to see where you're at. Well, you just go with the next number, and it'll continually add. You're just saving time. Again, so to walk you through this, you know what? I'm going to switch book sizes on us real quick. I'm going to go to a 10 by 15 album, and I'm going to play the 10 by 15 guides, drop those in there, and we're going to do a little bit different book. Okay, so this first image I'm going to crop to be a vertical. Let me walk through this one more time, getting ahead of myself. Okay, so go back to my selection logic. I've got a vertical, a horizontal, and then 3 more verticals. So what I'm thinking is that first vertical, I'm thinking I want to do a half panel with it. Okay, so that's going to be a 10 by 15 vertical, right? And then I'm thinking I want to do, I don't know the exact size, but I'm thinking I want to go to my half-inch lines here. And so I don't know the height, but I do know the width needs to be 9 inches. Okay, and so with that, I know that I want to put 3 verticals underneath it. So these need to be all 3 inches, right? But if I want this gap to be here, I'm just going to add 0.1. So I'm going to crop this at 9.1, so it's a little bit wider than these three combination. So this is just going to give me a little gap between them. If I want a bigger gap, okay, make it 0.2. If I want a nice big gap, make it 0.3. You can do whatever you want. I'm just adding a little bit to the width of this. And again, I'm going to keep the full frame. I'm not going to plug in the height in the crop tool. And that way I can just crop it to the width. I'm going to drag these three images. I'm going to align this edge here to this edge to this edge, and then I'm going to just align them, distribute them, and they're going to be perfectly evenly spaced with the main block. Let's walk through this. Throw that away, we don't need it. Okay, so here's our first one. C for crop, enter to quickly enter into it. 10 by 15, 300 dpi, crop that out. Okay, so here's that horizontal. Width, I'm going to delete out everything. I'm going to go 9.2. We'll go in the middle there. I don't want a height, so I'm going to do 300 and crop that to 9.2 wide. Perfect. All right, so now I want my width to be 3. Again, I don't want to worry about the height, so I'm just going to crop them to 3 inches wide. Because I'm doing full frame crops, I'm not cropping in on them. Now if I was cropping in a little bit, I'd either have to do one of two things. I'd have to put a width and a height so that they stay even, or I'd have to drag it all the way out and then hold down shift as I crop in. I don't want to do that. I just want to go ahead with full frame because I tend to shoot fairly full frame. And so now I'm going to tab back through. I've got one image above my layout and hit my drop zone. I don't want to save the cropped images, because if they call me back and say, hey, I really want that bigger, I don't want to have to worry about it. Now here's the last one. There's not another image. It's asking, do I want to save or close this layout? I'm just going to say cancel. And so you can see here, I can drag that main image over. I can drag my horizontal over. Like I said, I'm just going to align the outer edges of the images. And I'm going to take these three images and I'm going to distribute them and align them. And then this one little gap here, top to bottom, I'm just going to eyeball it because it's close enough that that album spread would be done. Now the last thing I might do is I might grab all the images on the right hand side as a grouping, hit free transform, Command T or Control T on the PC. And not that I'm going to resize it. I'm not even worried about this little 1/10 of an inch hanging over the 1/2 inch. All I'm really using this for is to give me a bullseye of my entire group. So I can center up that bullseye, press enter. So I'm not really free transforming, I'm just moving them. And now that layout is ready to save. And you can see here, it still went straight back to that PSD folder. So the other thing that I'm doing here with this process of never really closing the album layout is I don't have to navigate through my file system to get back to the client's album folder. I'm ready to just go back into it. Now since I did open a new layout, it didn't save the numbers. But at this point, I'd be ready to hit my 10 by 15 reset guides, and it resets everything, and it's ready for the next album layout. Okay, so just kind of repeat the process a few times here, because it's all, to me, it's all in the cropping. And I find that when you pre-crop, it can be really, really fast. So here I have 7 images. I've got a primary image, and then I've got 3 clusters of 2. Here's a pair, here's a pair, and here's a pair. So what I'm seeing, just kind of walk through what I'm seeing here, is with my brush, I'm going to do a pano over here. So here's another 10 by 15. And then I'm going to do a pair, a pair, and a pair. Now I don't know what this size is, so I'm going to crop them to 4 by 6 and then just resize the whole grouping to fit. Because I know that 4 by 6 will end up being 18 inches tall, because 6-inch images stacked 3 times tall will be a little bit tall. but I'm not worried about that because I'm shrinking them. I'm not making them bigger. Okay, so this is a 10 by 15, and I'm going to crop that, and then tap enter, go 4 by 6, and I'm just going to run through and crop these really quickly. Cute little guy here. You can see some of them I'm cropping in, some of them I'm not. I'm keeping them full frame. And that's the nice thing. They're all going to be 4 by 6s when I'm done. Okay. So now I hit drop zone. Carefully just watching, making sure that, okay, not quite enough drop zone here to finish there. So I had to hit it again a second time. Cancel that. There we go. And so you can see at full speed we can design pretty quick here. I'm just kind of lining these images up. So get this all lined up. And so now, yes, obviously these are too big. I'm just going to grab the whole set, free transform. I'm going to line it up to the center, the bullseye of that left page. I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt at the same time. Just kind of shrink it in. I'm going to go in a little bit extra there. Tap enter. And I'm just going to select my top two and tab them up a little bit. My bottom two. And then these left two. Got a little bit ahead of myself there. And if I want to be really picky and get that perfectly centered, I can again grab that whole set, free transform the whole grouping. I'm not actually transforming, I'm just using that bullseye to show me where the center is at, and that layout would be set to save. And that's how fast we can go through the process, and I'd be ready to jump to the next layout and grab another set of images. And so it's that quick. We just keep going through the album process, cropping, running the drop zone, lining them all up, do a quick save as, and then I run the guides reset, and we just kind of keep going. So that is Photoshop WoW 6.2, and our process and how we do our pre-cropping, our album guides, and a little bit of our studying with the album layouts, and how we just do our free-formed album layouts. So look forward to showing y'all some really cool stuff next week. Next week we're going to dive into custom album backgrounds, textures, giving that romantic or grungy or funky feel that you're seeing in the backgrounds of a lot of books today. Even some of the stuff that's going on top of images, we're going to show you how we're doing that. Some of that, adding in actual graphic scrolls, how to manipulate the scrolls, and just kind of finish off the background with a really dramatic look and a dramatic effect. So that'll be next week, and we really appreciate you listening.